Welcome, everyone. Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Christ consciousness. What I'm going to cover today is directed energy weapons, also called DEW. I've recently listened to a couple of people who claim that they had been hit by these weapons, and there's a great misunderstanding of what DEW weapons are and what psychotronic weapons are. And these are these directed energy weapons are physical energy weapons, and I'll explain what they are in a minute. Two people have claimed they've been hit by these things. One of them, of course, is a Max Egan. The other one is a David Schurter, who Egan, of course, is a person that is talks against the government. He's an Australian. Of course, you couldn't be in a worse place than Australia with their kind of watched and managed reality down there. Kind of a strange situation there in general. So he tells people, of course, to turn off their phones and other things. Apparently, he's fairly public. I haven't really heard much about him, but has gotten on the target list. The other one is the David Schurter, which is a past satanic abuse victim who claims that he was controlled by and taught by the infamous Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino. Because he's everywhere. I mean, he's just everywhere. He's just everywhere doing everything. And it's got to the point where it's pretty comical. And, I've written to him just a few days ago asking him, well, what's the proof that you were involved with Aquino? And he claims he was taught all this high-level magic, which I really can't find Aquino knows any of that. I mean, he studied traditional texts from the Golden Dawn, and he may be a dedicated student, but he doesn't have anything special. No. And there's nothing that he's ever said special. So he claims he has all this very potent occult training, that he can do most anything, and he's alive because of that. I don't think too many people take him seriously, but he gets around as most of these people are. And one apparently seems to talk to the other, unlike people who claim that they are seeking truth or want to report things that don't want to report to people that know things. They want yes men or people to confirm the delusion they're living in. That's your typical reporter out there. So, understanding all this, the topic, and it's been talked about for a lot of times, is directed energy weapons. Now, there's a lot of people who are experiencing these kind of attacks, but are they? Now, people who are hearing voices, other things similar to that, and a lot of people, there was this big story that came out of, was it the Cuban embassy or whatever, that CIA agents were hearing sounds and other things. And this was all classified initially as some sort of mental problem. It came out that this has been verified by the CIA, that this was some sort of energy weapon. Subtle energy weapon is what they're leaving out. I can't believe that the higher level spooks, the whores that work for these people, scientists, are not familiar with subtle energies. But they may not. They may be missing the point here, which is one of the reasons why I have been so pigeonholed and suppressed. But whatever. It's pretty much been happening my entire life. So you have to wonder if this is something that, of course, in the bigger mystical picture, being brought in to do certain work, and of course the opposition knows that and then fights against you all your life. Very interesting, but that's neither here nor there. Now, there's always been talk of psychotronic weapons. Psychotronics is in the family of radionics. Psychotronics is interesting, but psychotronics has always been considered non-electric, shape-powered. Now, psychotronics, Pavlita, the famous Czechoslovakian, who was in the famous book that talked about the research being done there, that built certain devices by shape that created energies to have certain effects. One of them was to kill insects in a radius there. And supposedly this was proven. Again, we just don't know. We don't have good information. That book was written. Was it verified? The problem is you take a bunch of reporters over there, and what do they really know? Somebody shows them a box. Was there a bottle of Raid in that machine that he pressed the side of it and shot out and it killed insects? We don't know. But we're going by the assumption that this was powerful psychotronics, and these are mostly known to be non-electric, but produce that. Now, we had some films on our channel for a while that showed this, and if you hunt through YouTube, you can find things. Pavlita, who's very famous for this. As I said, most of his stuff has not been translated even 60 years later. We don't really know what was going on, what his work was doing. But there are some films that have surfaced, and you'll see him creating energy from or moving objects from machines that are non-electric. They're non-magnetic. Well, how does that happen? He claims that the shape, and this can be demonstrated by the fact of pyramids create energy, yet they're just a shape. And they're not made from anything special. So with that, the shape of the pyramid, it can be made out of plastic, it can be made out of granite, it can be made out of metal. But, there's no ancient pyramids that were made out of copper and metal. So none of that is true. There's some claim maybe capstones had this on the top of them, but they're really so the ancients weren't making things out of metal, and they could have. They had metals, and they could have smelted it down and make huge, or at least bars of metal, etc. And there are some of this out there, rods, etc., but not a lot. So the whole idea was the shape that powered them. There's even a little special on this, I think, narrated by Roger Moore that talked about these. And the one things you can't find in Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union, which you could buy just about, tanks, missiles, MiG jets, you couldn't buy a single psychotronic instrument. And the Russians that I've talked to, particularly around then, say, this is something you don't ask about. You end up in the river. So, and I'm sure that's true. Even though there's a lot of information in Russia about all sorts of studies, and of course, none of this has been translated as of late. So, it's the same old story. There are language problems. There's reams of information that even date back to the Crusades that have never been translated from ancient English into, or French or whatever it may be, into modern English. They still have stacks of this stuff. It takes specialized people. It costs a lot of money. You got to spend your whole day doing that. I mean, this is not something you translate in a weeks or months or even a year. It could take years. So these are all the problems that people don't understand, but is the bigger picture. Why? Because, you can say to yourself, well, why is all this going? Well, it's very complicated. There's a whole bunch of reasons, and we have all sorts of money for things that don't really matter. The whole world does. So all of this is very interesting. So psychotronic weapons, which have been talked about in several different books, something I've specialized in as well is the psychotronic weaponry and warfare, which I've been studying since I was the first one to publish psionic combat, or was it psionic? Did I name it psionic combat, or was psionic warfare? Which I think was combat that I published, written by Charles Casamato 40 years ago, and that was the first book to deal with this as the general public. Methods of using psychic and radionic, psionic type energy to affect somebody in a combat situation. So I was the first one to ever publish that. And offer it to the public for many years. And the only first person to write about it was Charles Casamato at that time. And of course, these are all very simplistic books, but they are interesting. And if nothing else, they kind of open up your imagination to the many uses that these have. Now, directed energy weapons are not psychotronic in nature. They are not subtle energy in nature. They are very physical energies. They just lack what we would consider a bullet or a rocket head that explodes. That doesn't mean that they are not carrying their own type of projectiles that affect the human body and mind. So we need to fully understand that as well. People don't get that. Projected energy weapons are more something that you would consider out of the movies, ray gun type things. But the bottom line is that they are within an acceptable distance and they're pointed at a particular subject. So directed energy weapons that are not positioned near you. Now, one person talked about being affected by these weapons and ended up being kind of goofy afterwards, and claimed that there was a truck parked near his house in Britain, the famous remote viewer. So, but he talked about this, and then after that he started acting very strange and getting very bizarre. But this would fit a directed energy weapon because you have to be within the range, and this could be miles away, but they have to target you. They have to hone in on you. And they're not going to be able to necessarily track you unless these are done from some sort of satellite situation where they're using some sort of energy beam. But these can be detected fairly easily to a degree if you're using monitors and other things. These people are claiming they're being affected by this in their own home and wherever they go for certain periods of time. There are other people that are hearing voices and other things that this was with them all the time. And we've talked about this in many different lectures covering that very traumatic area, people who are on, quote, psychotronic attack, and they hear things, they see things, etc. These have been traced to delivery of these signals into houses, and they're more of a radionic psychotronic thing, which is a non-physical or subtle energy field into people's homes through electrical wires and everything. Which makes sense. I mean, you could basically put up a transmitter of this kind of energy somewhere on someone's telephone lines, cable lines, electrical lines, and they would send this into that particular person's house. Now, this happens with the utility people all the time. They are constantly involved with organized crime to monitor organized crime and, of course, illegal government practices, monitoring your phone lines, monitoring your cell phones, monitoring your cable. All of this is there, including putting bugging devices in your house. This is very common. Happens all the time. That's what these harassment people do, these criminals. This is all part of what they do. They're all trained in one place in Texas, and they all distributed across the country, and they're literally tens, maybe hundreds of millions of these people that work directly or indirectly for these people that they buy off in many ways. They bought off my neighbor by giving him cars to race, which he had no income to do that with, and lots of money to serve as a harassment of me for many, many years, for 30 years, by the way. So this is all part of the little game. This is what they do. If you don't think this stuff is real, well, it is. It's hard to believe. But the fact that they do this to a nobody, while the pedophiles and the criminals and all the things that go on are ignored, but they're getting paid from them, and they get paid to do this as well. And there's endless money to do it. But it's amusing. It just shows you how screwed up the world is, that they want to harass regular people for doing nothing, of course. But this is all part of the criminal collection agencies that are ran by people, gangs, the Hells Angels, etc. This is all part of what they do. And you need to understand that because these are the same people that are using these directed energy weapons of a type. Now, there are different classes of these weapons, and let's get over the typical weapon. Now, and what has to be understood is their science behind these things are very important. And as I said, I've been studying these for years, and of course, the technology that I use incorporate things like this for positive uses. Because, everything can be used for good or bad. You can use microwaves to fry somebody's brain, or you can use it to cook your frozen dinner. So all of this needs to be fully understood. So when we get into directed, people are they think that all of these things are kind of psychotronic, radionic based, which means that they're using subtle energies, tuning into you specifically, and then sending these energies to you no matter where you are virtually on the universe. So you could be on Mars, and if you connect to that person, you'll be able to send them energies to affect them. So I'm not sure there is a range. It's like all the things that deal with subtle energy physics, astral projection, psychic work in general. Nothing stops these energies, and there isn't really a distance involved. So these weapons tend to be of different classes, but there's many types of them. Your typical, and these things fall into particle beams, and so many other things. But they use one of the main ways of sending disruptive energies to people is using microwaves. And they claim that the Chinese now have a handheld gun, directed energy gun, that you point at crowds, and it sends out particular types of energies that totally freak your mind out, cause all sorts of problems, from vomiting to losing your bowels to everything else. But you can't stay within the beam. Now, you do have to direct these. You just can't shoot the beam at the town, or the whole town would be affected. So when they use these things, and they could be sound weapons, most of them are laser-based, and these things can carry information or just be very destructive. If you walk into a microwave energy field, you're going to feel horrible heat and will start to fry you in your brain. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to get out of that area. You're going to leave. And these kind of things have been in use actually for quite some time. So General Alexander, who has been involved in the remote viewing programs and is a person looking for alternative weaponry for his entire career, has been at the forefront of all of this. And they have figured out how to send electromagnetic energies to you to affect what you're thinking. And of course, these are all considered non-lethal weapons. So one of the most effective, of course, is microwave and lasers. So these are all part of it, and I don't want to spend too much energy here. I think I'll leave a link to a particular article where, if you want to read more on these and the lasers, etc., of how they work. But one of the things we have to understand is that these people getting these effects of hearing sounds and other things, unless they are psychically damaged by these direct energy weapons. And of course, the people that were reporting all this were CIA agents that were in embassies and so forth. Apparently, the Cuban embassy, of course, there were famous attacks of this in the Russian embassy, where everybody who went to that particular embassy apparently was getting cancer and other things in the end of it. And they would have these directed energy beam weapons beamed at that place 24/7. But you still would only be affected if you're within the beam. So we have to understand that. So these two people I mentioned, this Australian, this other guy, well, they would have to target you. Now, can they do this from space and shoot it through a satellite to you specifically? Well, it certainly is possible. I've been experimenting with using satellites to send radionic information to for many years now. You get a satellite tuner, which tells you where your satellite is for regular satellite transmissions, TV shows, whatever it may be, sports events. Well, you can find where the satellite is, and you can send a psychotronic radionic message to that actual satellite. You can do the same thing with cell phones. I'm giving out a lot of secrets here, which take a lot of technical ability to do, and I won't go past that. But I've been doing this for many years, and this is a way of getting a particular energy out to masses, or directing it to a particular person. So you can direct energy to a person by knowing their cell phone number and using a cell phone tower to send that energy to, which will then send it to that particular person. And it's a complicated, high-tech process but I'm just trying to let you know that these things are possible. So how are these people being affected? Both these people claim that they were near death, they felt terrible, etc., etc., and they were disoriented for many days and had serious problems. Both of them are still alive. It didn't kill them. So, that English person, just remembered his name. I'm terrible with names. Tim Refat. And I haven't heard much from him lately, but He claimed this, and then after these things happened, of course, he was thrown into mental hospitals and other things, all the typical things they do to people to harass them. His information is interesting. His book on remote viewing is excellent. So there is something I don't have in terms of what he sells. I have not been able to verify their effectiveness. Many people have told me they're not effective. So, and of course, he's very unhappy with that. But we all have to understand that. So, what he considers psychotronic tools and everything else are basically crystals and other things that he programs with. So there's a question there, but I don't want to get into him again. I've already talked about him, but he was a victim of these directed. But they parked a van, he claimed, outside of his or near his home. Now that makes sense to me again. Now, maybe they did that with other people. I don't know if any of these people noticed suspicious trucks around their homes or cars. They could be theoretically have a beam weapon that is trained on their house, and you just have to train it on the general area or a house, so to speak. I don't think you'd want it any bigger than that because that would have a problem affecting others. But again, it would affect others, affect people behind you, etc. These type of energies don't stop at your house. They continue to go. So it's going to affect people behind you and around you, etc., especially if they're sloppy with it. Now, if you have a psychotronic, they're going to tune into you and only you and send you that. And of course, this is the same process that you would do with a radionic machine. Radionic machines are basically psychotronic machines. And you would want to send these directed energies to a particular target. You wouldn't want to just send them anywhere. Now, maybe you'd want to do that in a chaotic or an attack situation in a military, freak out the entire town, cause these things. But that's a whole nother subject. These people are claiming they're under these, which is unlikely. Other people are damaged directly that have to deal with these energies of being attacked. All of this is part and parcel of these kind of massive amounts of these psychotronic attacks, which seem to be amplified by cell phones, by parasites, which may be created by these beams. I mean, after all, if you want to have something really work, and you want something to be an advanced product, well, you can't manufacture it directly. You have to create a cyborg. You have to create a particular biological entity, and that's what they used to call a lot of these extraterrestrials. The technical term was extraterrestrial biological entity. Hebes is what they used to call them. Or EBs. I used to call them Hebes because I dealt with a lot of hostile biological entities. Extraterrestrial biological entity. But the biological entity is the key word. So the whole idea is you want to create something because this is the perfect thing that works. The humankind has been able to get to the level it has because of its biologicalness, hands, feet, movement. All of this you're able to do. Other animals can't, and they're much stronger and smarter than us. So if a tiger had hands and feet, well, they'd rule the world. Certainly have the physicality to control anybody. You have a trouble handling a parrot. So the whole idea is that's the reality of life. So with that, we have to fully understand these types of technologies and how they're actually done. So directed energy beams or weapons, now they have these, a whole bunch of them already. I even had that on my YouTube channel for a while. The Israelis had one of these lasers on a ship, and you just point the laser. I mean, this is right out of, the movies. Laser guns. What did they use in Star Trek? Photon missiles. What was all those? The beams they shot at other crafts. Well, we have those. We've had lasers. The beam itself, which will burn up and go through anything. So, causing mass destruction is a problem, I would think, because a beam is just that. It's a directed energy. But if you project it at a tank or an airplane, it's going to do its job. If you project it at a city, well, it's going to blow up whatever it hits. And I guess you could, or burn through it. I guess this could be very effective, especially if you're trying to take out infrastructure, electric production, water facilities. Well, if you blow big holes in them or burn big holes through them, well, you're going to do enough damage to it. But it's not like a bomb. You're not going to drop a bomb. If you drop a bomb on a water treatment plant, it's going to blow everything in that where the bomb's reach is. It's going to blow it all up. If you hit it with an energy beam, it's going to burn a big hole in there, and hopefully you're hitting something of value. And generally, if the hole is big enough and intensive enough, you're going to start to destroy all sorts of things. So we must understand the difference between the two. And also, you never hear of any of these weapons being used because they'll never talk about it because it's frightful to most people in general. But it also is considered a weapon that is so advanced that if someone knows you're using these kind of weapons, that they will immediately go nuclear. So they use these all the time, but nobody reports on it. So these things that you think are bombs or missiles, and of course those are pretty effective and they serve as a great psychological deterrent. When you hear a bomb and you see fires and everything else, well, that's very panicking. It kills it works as a great psychological tool. So you'll see this in war as well. If someone sees an energy beam hitting something, well, they may not even recognize it, but they're going to assume it was a missile they just didn't hear. Microwaves or other things. And of course, these are great for anti-personnel. You hit somebody with microwaves and other things, and we've all heard how dangerous microwaves are. But we use them every day, and we put them right up to our ear, called the cell phone. So these are all things that fry your brain. And there's a whole range of these things. Mostly is what people use are lasers. Now, the one thing about lasers that people don't understand as well is that lasers carry or can carry informational fields. Now, few people, it's apparently, well, everybody's, oh, lasers, I know it. That what Buck Rogers used. But nobody understands that lasers are commonly used in everything. And they're kind of just, oh, lasers, they're nothing. More people think, oh, you got a laser in there? I don't want to get burned. I don't know how many people I've talked to since we use a lot of lasers that say, well, lasers burn you. Well, I can't use no lasers. Well, of course, that's ridiculous. But there are lasers now that are very inexpensive that are powerful enough to burn you. But of course, that's not what you use to transfer information, and its lasers are based on frequencies. So red lasers are a particular low-level frequency, and you get to the highest frequency when you get into the purple, blues, etc. And of course, there are lasers which are used in security systems, and they are infrared. You don't see them at all, yet the beam is there. You know, kind of like those old movies where they spray the hairspray and they see the beams coming out. Those are in the museum when you're trying to steal something. Well, this is these are called infrared. You don't see it. These were used on the trade centers as well. They used infrared lasers to blow these things up as part of the process. There was a spillover with these things with directed energy beams at 9/11. Another thing that's covered up, but you know, several miles away or around the trade center, they found a whole bunch of vehicles that were melted. Well, how did this happen? Well, I was roasting weenies on the fire from the 9/11 buildings, and all of a sudden my car melted. So the whole idea is that this is the kind of nonsense that you listen to. But a lot of that was covered up. There's a whole book on that by some woman I don't remember. But, I mean, it's irrefutable. I mean, where did these melted cars come from that are half a mile away from the trade center? Well, this is a directed energy beam weapon that they probably did it deliberately to see the effects on. There was so much data collected from that over the tragedy of it that it's shocking. A lot of different secret weapons were used on the trade centers in 9/11, directed energy beam weapons. So, now what we're talking about mostly is PSYOP type weapons that affect people mentally here, electromagnetic, microwave, etc. But these can be directed to you as a human to kill you, and God knows how far away. So if they target you, but they have to target you like a bullet. So they're just not going to shoot it in the area. Now they can, but that's not going to be probably enough to kill anybody. It will disrupt everybody, and you'll run like hell. Because it's even spookier when you don't see that bullet coming at you. So that you can understand, but just feeling weird and attacked, and you're vomiting, and your brain's starting to fry, and nobody's around, is super frightening. So this is not anything overly new, and you can read about these things. And Colonel John Alexander and Non-Lethal Weapons have been studying this for years, as well as everything else. And there is information on this if you want to hunt it up. So there's an awful lot of things that can be done this way. You put this on a boat, and you can go to off the coast. God knows the range of these things. You can go, God knows, 50, 100 miles away, target that from your ship out in the middle of the ocean, and target a country, and you'll do that. But as I said, you don't hear about this stuff happening. I'm assuming it's used for very critical targets. They may even follow up like the Air Force loves to do when they get reports of UFOs in the area. They send up planes that drop flares. Oh, I told you it's just flares. Don't you get that, Mr. Thor? So yeah, they do that after the either secret crafts or that. So this is their big response to that. So they can always say, yeah, well, we dropped flares over there. That's what you saw. Know the game, people. This is why everybody thinks everything's a conspiracy and nobody dies normally. Everybody's murdered. The problem is a lot of that does go on. We do have to keep that understood. And of course, all of this is part of the capacity to go on. And we've been using laser targeting for many, many years. Even regular firearms, pistols, rifles, use lasers to target people. And wherever you point the laser, wherever that beam hits is where your bullet will hit. So you can use these as targeting or guidance systems as well for conventional type weapons. But there are these kind of weapons that you can target out there. Now the question is, how good are they at targeting individuals like these two I just talked about? Well, as I said, if you're going to use these conventional disruptive weapons, but you couldn't really keep this on somebody for days. You can't hit somebody with a microwave beam or an actual laser that is destructive on somebody for any period of time. What we're talking about now, if you hit them with microwaves, this is different. So they're using some sort of electromagnetic disturbance wave, microwaves, to disorient these people. But if they got the full effect of it, I've had it on me for days. Well, if you were being hit by a microwave beam energy weapon, you would be dead within minutes. So this is just nonsense. So we do have to understand, what are we talking about here to clarify the different types of directed aim. Now, these are very directed. These are very military purpose things. And these have been in use for 20, 30 years. And as targeting, maybe 40 years, they've been used as targeting. And we've used, as I said, people think that lasers are something really strange or burning, etc. Yet we use lasers every day, a lot of things. Now, every day when you go to the supermarket, that little red light you see there that scans the barcode for the actual, to give you the price of that item and is used as an inventory as well. It's a great way to track inventory because it's been scanned. They know what sells. And it also has the price in there, which they can change by computer instantly, etc. It's a great system. A lot of people think that puts bad energy within your food. Well, I'm not sure that does all that much. Generally, red lasers do not transfer enough information to be upsetting, and it's unlikely that is causing any kind of energy disturbances. And certainly I wouldn't think would stay in your food, but whatever. That's the laser. So the laser reads the barcode. It takes that information. And understand how this works, because people don't get it. The laser scans the information with the beam. The beam transfers, while it's on, transfers that information through the photons. That's what a laser is. In the beam. So it's like a hose. It's like a water hose. But the difference is it doesn't go in one direction. It scans it and it goes back into the machine. The machine then reads it and transfers that into data. Now, is that effing amazing? But what does that tell you? It tells you that photons carry information, and real advanced computers will be photonic based. We hear about all these quantum computing. Well, all we need to do is use lasers. I'm not sure why there's a problem here of what they're trying to do. They're trying to use cellular activity and so. Well, all you need to do is transfer information through laser beams. Photons will carry unlimited information, and they're based on frequencies. Now, red is a very low frequency. Purple, blue is a very high frequency, which carries tons of information. Now, I don't know how many people know this. I've stated it several times, but we had the big debate, which I guess is falling out of use now because we no longer use CDs or DVDs to any great extent. It's easier, I guess, to have some sort of digital record where you could pull up, doesn't weigh anything. Like I've got 6 cases, big, giant. I think there's 300 pockets in them. I've got like 6 of these, or they're 8, filled with DVDs, and they're damn heavy. So the problem is that when you have a digital record, you generally miss all the extras. I like commentaries. I like extra information. You generally don't get that when you buy just the actual digital file, but certainly the weight of a digital file compared to a CD is minuscule. The way around that is to digitize everything in terms of even take the CD information and put that on a digital format, which is what I do now, so I don't have to carry tons. It's bad as books. All my books are digitalized now, so I don't have to have shelves and shelves of heavy stuff that is impossible to cart around with you. And takes a huge amount of space up and has to be maintained and cleaned, etc. And of course, physical books are nice to a degree, but it's a conditioning. You know, I love physical books, or used to. Now I find them a problem. I prefer to pull the digital copy out. So it's good to understand that of what's going on. But the other thing is CDs. Now you have, we went through this whole thing of Blu-ray. Now, does anybody know what Blu-ray means? Well, blue means blue, the color blue, or the frequency of blue, and ray means laser. So it's blue laser. That's what you get that great quality out of. And Blu-rays are fantastic. I buy them all the time now, exclusively, when I buy DVDs. Just bought the new Matrix in a Blu-ray, and the quality of that film, is amazing, even over DVD quality. It's worth the extra money if you really want a good picture and are going to watch things several times. These things have went into the digital format of having 2K, 4K, whatever this is. I believe Blu-ray is 1K. Now we have 2 and 4K, which is the amount of lines per square inch or whatever. So the more lines you have, the better picture you have. So they're breaking it down into this digital thing. But what you're doing here is that you put a disc in there, and a blue laser is underneath that. It shines onto the disc, the plastic disc, which has the information on it. And again, this whole technology, and nobody knows anything about this, and it's kind of fascinating. So they, which they couldn't do with VHS because you couldn't mass market those, why the price was so high. But you can now print out DVDs and Blu-rays. They just print them out. You don't have to copy them as what you did with a VHS. So the bottom line is that the information is put into this plastic disc, kind of like a record, and then instead of using a record needle, does anybody know that terminology anymore? Vinyl's coming back. But the whole idea is that the laser is like a needle. It hits the grooves there, and the information is taken from the disc in the same beam. So you have a beam that is going front and back at the same time, almost like alternating current, and it takes the information off of there as much as you need, because blue has a huge amount of information. You can't do it with green. It has half of what blue. Red has like a third. So the frequency, which comes out to a color, is how these things work. So that's how it works. So that's how information is transmitted and how we use this all the time. Now, lasers are used in a whole bunch of things that you don't know about, and certainly in advanced technologies. One of the things that have been used probably the longest is fiber optic systems. Now, fiber optics has always been a way. And the great thing about lasers and fiber optics is there's no electromagnetic interference. You could run a fiber optic line. These were used in many things. They're used in cables and originally started in phones, and there'll be no interference whatsoever. You could run it right through. You could put the strongest magnets you want all around it, would not affect it. Doesn't affect photons. That's what you're dealing with. So fiber optics is you have this clear wire. You run a light that follows that clear it's basically a clear plastic wire, but the photons follow that to wherever it's going with the information in it, meaning what you just stated in a telephone or whatever information it is. Then that is transmitted virtually at the speed of light to the other target. Very interesting. But nobody really thinks of lasers at all. They think of the comic book understanding of lasers. They think they burn stuff, and of course they do, and you can buy a laser to light your cigarettes or whatever you want to light with now inexpensively. Those used to cost fortunes. Purple lasers about 7-8 years ago were several $1,000s. If you were lucky, you could get one for under $1,000, and it wouldn't be unusual that they are $3,000-$4,000. Now you can get good purple lasers for a few dollars. That's how the technology. And that's the beauty of China and mass production. You can bring down the price of these things, and they can now be used. I was using lasers in my Radionic machines 30 years ago, but we only had red back then because everything else was too expensive, and they just didn't carry the kind of information that we like. But the principles were good, and we'll talk about all those things in another lecture. But so radionics used in a combat situation or psionic combat, the book that I published, talked about this in a very primitive way, but it opened up that kind of field of showing that what can be done here. And of course, if you can send energy to heal someone, which is what radionics is famous for, you certainly can send energy to someone to hurt them. And people have been experiencing this for many times. Even as I said recently, I had someone report to me that they were being attacked by some radionic practitioner for some reason. I'm still trying to figure the whole story out. But these weapons are very, very common. Now, they talked about this before, and there was talk of the fact of the Russians using these psychotronic weapons to affect ships and other things, which the gossip on these things is that they were able to sink a ship this way. Now, there is an actual treaty between the United States and Russia, whatever that means, not to use psychotronic weapons. Well, why was that put in a treaty if it was just science fiction? So there is an actual treaty outlawing psychotronic weapons. And these kind of psychotronic beamed out energy, the Soviet Union was doing for a long time through a giant antenna. I believe it was in the Ukraine. The antenna was powered by Chernobyl beaming towards the west. And ever since that was up, Western society did decay at a much faster rate. Crime rates went up, disease rates went up, people started murdering more. All of this has been linked indirectly to the beaming of these chaotic and destructive energies through this giant antenna, which I'm not sure where that was located. It's a long time since I read that, but apparently this giant antenna was powered by Chernobyl. When Chernobyl went down, so did the antenna. So who knows what was going on there as well. So these are all the things that we are very interesting. But we got to understand what a directed energy beam weapon is. And it is not, in terms of the U.S. military, these are very physical tools that have to be directed towards you specifically. So these are not something that you can easily target an individual with. You can target crowds, you can target individuals, but generally the new weapon that supposedly the Chinese have now to handle crowds, but you have to point it at the crowd. You can't point it from behind a building. They have to be within direct line of sight. Of course, there are things that are directed energy lasers, but they still have to be, the laser can't go through a building, then go to the other side of the building, and then go to another building. So if the energy beam hits something, it's going to hit it and destroy it or burn through it, and no matter where it is. So you would have to target a specific area to get the effects you want. So now they're talking about, what these people are talking about is some sort of microwaves that are being broadcast at them. Now, this certainly can be done. We have lots of microwaves around us. We have lots of these cell towers, which can put out all sorts of bizarre energies. And again, they will be very general. They're not going to affect you specifically and only. They are going to expect, if a cell tower is putting out negative energies, they're going to be able to, that will affect anybody within the radius of that. It's not a targeted, it's not a laser beam-like hit. So if these people were being affected, well, how are they doing that? Now, if it was affecting them only again, so this guy, and I don't know if it was affecting anybody else in his family, but he didn't mention it, and neither did this other guy, that if they were targeting generally, let's say his entire house, that would affect everybody in it, including pets and animals and other things. So it's not going to affect you only, unless they're psychotronically tuned in with subtle energy, physics energy. So what you're doing is putting disruptive energies of whatever type of your choosing and directly tuning it into the energetic field of that person. That's what you do with radionics. If you want to affect somebody, send yourself success, send yourself or someone else, well, you tune it into that person by using a photograph or their actual radionic rate. And this is the way it happens. So you cannot send something to somebody that is non-directed, because you will affect the entire area, or at the very least that entire house. So if it was a satellite projected energy to you, well, it's going to hit your house. And if it's too big of a spectrum, it's going to affect a large area. Now, they probably don't care, but it would have to be in that way. And of course, if you move, let's say you went to the store or went out to get shopping or get a coffee, well, it's going to be still at your house unless it's somehow tracking you personally. And again, this would have to be directed through some sort of satellite system that would be tracking you personally. Now, we know they can do all this stuff. They track you on your phone. They know where you are. Well, they could be setting it up to a beam of energy or psychotronic device. Well, a beam of energy is what we're talking about here now, which could then follow you, which would be in the physical spectrum. You got to remember that photons are in the physical measurable spectrum. We can measure photons relatively easily. When you're getting into subtle energy fields, this is an area that's very difficult, but you don't have to move with that person. You connect the energy to them, and it just keeps working. That's how psychotronic, radionic equipment works. So if you set up an energy field to send to a person, as I said, let's say it's success or to help them in a business deal, it doesn't matter where they are, it doesn't matter where they sleep or where they travel to, anywhere in the universe, that energy will be sent to them for that. And your body will take it in and use it, because especially since it's positive, you won't be fighting it. So that's a different time, because you are tuned into their etheric energy bodies, their basic who they are in the universe. And that's what you do. And that's what, of course, cosmic codes that I work with are all about. This cosmic code is your energetic number in the universe. And you can tune into that person by using their cosmic code, and you're directly connected to that person. So you can then send them the type of energies that are on your particular energy cell that you get. Health, success, money, all the things that you want to empower yourself with. The energy is going directly to your symbolic number that represents you in the universe. And everything is labeled with numbers now, or what we call math. So this is a valid understanding in the human consciousness and works very well. But this is not a directed energy weapon. You would have to direct it. These directed energy weapons are all based on using direct line of fire. The distance, of course, is probably secret, but how far they work and to what degree, we don't know. But they certainly, when you're using a laser, I mean, you could probably be hundreds of miles away. I mean, that's how powerful they are. And also it means how deadly it is, because you would never expect it. The other thing, again, is to use these infrared lasers. You're not going to see, as I said, the classic thing with lasers, because you've seen it in the movies, is you see the beam. Well, that's wrong. You don't need to see the beam to be affected by the laser. So that's what, as I said, security systems are famous for this. These any type of detection system where you walk by and it triggers something. Well, you don't see that field. That's an infrared system. You can't see infrared. But theoretically, there is a beam there. And of course, we see in the movies that they highlight it with some sort of hairspray or something. And then all of a sudden, you see the beam there. You can do this with smoke or other things. And you see the beam that is being corrected, that is being produced there. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. Generally, you're not going to do that with an infrared security system in general. But you don't see it. That's the whole idea of it, particularly for security detection, is that these people trigger these things because they can't see them. So I believe there's infrared glasses where you can put on to see these beams, etc. But generally, you don't see them, and what was used in 9/11 was these infrared beams that you don't see. These things were blown up. There were other things that happened. Apparently, they use multi-destruction systems. They tested a lot of stuff and used the traditional thermite that you use in these to collapse buildings. So there, and of course, there's lots of traces of that there as well, so it is stated, and so many other things that happened there. So it was a big weapons testing system as well as doing what was going on there. And I don't think there were planes involved in any of that. So certainly there's never any planes found in the Pentagon and that other spot. And those images we saw of those planes never looked right to me. I don't think there were planes there. And so forth. But whatever, they used a multi-system of directed energy weapons on the Trade Center at 9/11. Now, these are weapons, as I said, that have been around for a long time. Lasers are not new. High-intensity lasers are not new. The technology is now cheap, and the public can get a lot of this stuff. But these are not technology that is secret or not known, and I'm sure they've been using these weapons for 20, 30 years. But this is, so to understand the kind of attack you have. Now, if you are under this psychotronic type attack, you can counter these with your own technologies. You can put counter energy fields in. But of course, none of these people know that. So you put disruption energies. Let's say you take a picture of your house, and then you detect the energies coming in, and you put reverse energy fields in, so you can disrupt these psychotronic attacks on you. So these are one way of doing it. And there's lots of ways to blunt these energies so that you are not affected as strongly. I'm not sure. It's very difficult to stop these things, but if you use counter energy or reverse energy waves that are coming in, you kind of reverse, because a wave will have a certain look to it. So if it's like anybody who's used a wood saw, it has these teeth on it. Well, what you do if you got two saws together and you put those teeth together, you would have no teeth because one fits in the other. So that stops the action of the teeth, meaning you couldn't really saw through wood. Well, the same thing is affecting you. So these are the kind of counter fields that you can put out there. And there's a lot of these counter things that can be done just using radionic protection in general. When you get into advanced systems and trying to go against these trillion-dollar systems that these militaries have, well, you're going to have to use very advanced equipment, and you're going to have a very skilled operator. But the average person can do a lot with a general system to protect themselves from pretty much 99% of the attacks. It's unlikely you're going to be targeted like these people claim they were. So what type of weapons this was done, etc. But the bottom line here is most likely this may not have even been sustained. So if you put informational energy to disrupt somebody in a psychotronic energy beam and you hit them with it, well, it's in them now. You don't necessarily have to sustain that, and it's now having its effect for, who knows, several days, many days. Do people kill themselves? Do they die from so-called illnesses? These beams are also programmed to weaken the immune system and also to create parasites within you. So everybody that I check now, and particularly people under attack, have a high parasite level, which is very interesting. It seems like the parasites can create and sustain a lot of toxic energy fields. They may be working as antennas to draw in certain frequencies. Very smart, very devious. Why? Everything, as I mentioned, gets down to a biological entity. They work the best. Have something live off of you as a parasite that also serves as a director or container or producer of toxic energies, and you've got the perfect weapon. It's trying to hit somebody with a beam, trying to affect them 24/7 is going to be a very difficult process. And of course, if you're sending things through the electrical wires and through telephones and through cable and through your router, well, these are ways they do it right now, which is easy to do because they have control of all those networks of people, and the workmen there constantly are working for governmental and criminal organizations that they're being paid for. Again, I've seen this directly involved with me. That's what they do, and they mess with these things so that they know exactly what you're doing all the time. And there's all the traditional stuff. That's traditional bugging. All this is a high art form now and very easily done. And you know, people who think that they're going to keep their privacy, if you're really being attacked and gone after, it's a joke, because they know everything you do because they have sensors all over your house and everything else. If you don't think this is happening, they don't need to. You're not going to have privacy on your cell phone because they'll just hear you talking it, period. You don't need to decode what. They're not picking up signals. They're bugging you directly. You think that's kind of strange? It's hard. They can't do that. Some bogus idiot I just talked to thought he had privacy that way. So, and this is so typical, but that's what directed energy weapons are. So understand there's two types of classes of them. The super advanced psychotronic radionic tools, which have been, there are divisions or groups within the U.S. Air Force, the Russian Army, KGB, CIA that use these technologies all the time because of the fact that it's difficult to wrap their heads around it. And they really prefer, you know, a club over a toxic energy because it shows the effects there. A lot of credibility isn't given to that. But all these things are used and have been used. But remember, the type of weapons that were used on the American embassy in Moscow, these were microwave weapons. You don't see it, but they penetrate everything and they affect you. But it is affecting only the people in that building. And probably they had those targeted on the officers or living, I don't know if they were living quarters there or not, but the directors of those embassies, the head of the embassies, well, they knew where their offices were, so they directed the beams into their offices. Now, it would be interesting if other people within that embassy, how many of them got sick as well. These other things also do some permanent damage. So you start hearing things, hallucinating other things, because they are actually have damaged your mind. And this is done, of course, by both sides. Now, some of these lasers were stated to be used in the Iraqi war, where they had lasers and they were targeting jet planes. And they were actually hitting the pilots with lasers that would blind them. And you got to remember, this shows you how sophisticated this is. So they're actually able to direct these lasers at flying jets, which are not exactly moving slowly. But these are the ways, and of course, when they did slow down and other things, they would target them as well. And remember, if you can't see, you can't fight. So if you hit a bunch of people with bright light, just imagine, have you ever got blinded by light where you couldn't see anything? Well, imagine if you're in a battle situation. So these are all the type of things that would be considered a directed energy or light beam. They use electromagnetic weapons, because if you use a lot of electromagnetic energies towards the head, this can cause serious delusions, you see visions, and eventually brain damage and death. Microwaves are the same way. So you have all of these things, electromagnetic, lasers, lights. There's a whole array of these type of non-lethal weapons that can really disperse crowds and other things and can be affected. Now, this, as I've mentioned, when it comes into actually affecting an individual, you would have to be targeted to do that. Now, how someone's being targeted and the rest of their family isn't affected or anything else would have to be a psychotronic or radionic type weapon that was tuned on you specifically and had similar effects than the physical weapons. And this has similar effects because you are a biological entity again. So it's not going to have the same effect as you being blown away with a laser that would burn a hole in you and kill you or your brain. But these aren't things that affect you mentally. They destroy you physically. Now, electromagnetics and microwave beams have a mental effect on you as well as a heating and physical effect. And people have been hit by microwave weapons. It's like you are a food in a microwave oven. You start to heat up, and it is frightening. So these are the type of things that are out there that, of course, the human species are so good at. Can't cure cancer or COVID, but we can fry your brain. So the whole idea is that this is the reality of it. So we have to believe that the advancement in these psychotronic weapons, which have been kept secret for decades now, is pretty advanced. So they can target you anywhere you are and specifically target you. Because as usual, interviewers of all these things don't know anything about the subject matter, so they don't have any good questions. Did this affect your family? What was the feeling you had? And besides the fact of their disorientation, what other effects were they? And did anybody else around you? Well, if nobody around you is being affected, then this must be a targeted energy beam, otherwise known as a subtle energy beam, which has been produced by a subtle energy machine, otherwise known as a consciousness radionic type machine, and that's what was affecting him. But these things are real, people. They've been going on for a long time. These kind of shadow techniques and everything else, a certain percentage of the military and other people know about it. Most of this stuff is not the mainstream. These laser weapons are known everywhere. You can see pictures of them on the web without a problem whatsoever. This is not being hid, these laser weapons, and they've been around a long time. So there's nothing overly secret about them in terms of their ultimate distances, destructive power, and how they're used. Well, the actual application and the technology itself, of course, is very secret. But the fact that there's a laser weapon that can be used from a long way away that has very destructive powers is not. But this does not. You hit a person with a laser beam weapon like this, and you will incinerate them. You'll just burn them into nothing. Or you'll burn a giant hole in them, but that hole probably, there'll be nothing in that hole. Most likely you have incinerated part of them or all of them. So this is not something that's going to disorient you. Now, a general beam of microwaves or electromagnetic waves will disrupt you, and that's right. But it's very difficult to target you specifically, and you have to be in the sight of the weapon, meaning they have to point it at you and your home, or it's going to affect everybody. So generally, that's not directed. It's mass. So the only way you direct it is by using some sort of psychotronic radionic technology. Hopefully that's been informative, an area that few people talk about, and we'll be talking about this type of use of radionic equipment as well. It's part of life. There's a lot of bad people out there. You need to protect yourself and your family. You need to get the proper retribution you deserve. And all this is part of the bigger part of life. We have locks on our doors, our cars. We think we have to spend trillions on military and police. Well, point is that with all of that, does that make you feel secure? It doesn't make me feel secure. I'm not leaving my keys in the ignition. I'm not leaving my door open. People buy more and more locks. There's more and more security. There's more and more security guards. The bottom line is that the fact of all these things means that you have to take care of yourself personally. You have to be able to make sure that you get the justice which isn't available in the society, because there's very little justice, even if you're wealthy. But if you're wealthy, well, you pay millions of dollars to high-priced attorneys, and you probably will get justice that way. But we do need to understand that this is all part of life. If you abuse these things, well, it's like anything else in life. Eat 4 pounds of cake a day, you're going to have a bad body and you're going to get sick. You misuse any kind of drugs, you misuse anything. Well, these are misuse. You're not using them as prescribed. You use them to hurt innocent people. Well, you're falling into being an evil person. But most likely you're an evil person before that. You're just using tools to assist your evilness, Dr. Evil. So the whole idea is that that's how all that goes. So, but it's something everybody should be aware of. And I think this is kind of a fascinating subject. And we don't need physical things anymore. You know, the time of the physicality is over. We're moving into the new realm of physics, and that's the non-material, which creates the material. The essence of everything, that's the new physics. Until next time.